Om. Hari Om. And Hari Om also to all of people who may be joining online, either now or later. So we will continue with our theme, the trust that liberates. And in these two talks, I'm not going to make a fine-tuned difference between faith and trust. They will be used interchangeably, so please keep that in mind. So what is the trust that liberates? Well, as the other speakers have said, but perhaps I'll put in a little bit different words, it is a deep faith in the truth that liberates. The truth that liberates is actually a title of the last talk in Swami Chidanandaji's book, Ponder These Truths. And in that talk, he said, it is not the truths that are so powerfully proclaimed in the scriptures, or the truth that is so lovingly shared by the teachers, whether they're ancient, medieval, or modern, that can set us free. But it is the truth that we already are at the depth of our being that have the power to give us the freedom, the love, the joy that we are seeking, that we are longing for. And it is this truth at the depth of our being that is calling us, each one of us now. And it is the same truth that is embodied because of identification with the body and mind that is responding to that call. So Swami Chidananda once said, it is the self calling the self. And he also said, when I speak to you in the morning, I'm not speaking as an individual to another individual, but as the universal to the universal, or the impersonal to the impersonal. So it is a cosmic or a divine unfolding. But until we really recognize that, then hearing the truth, reflecting on the truth, contemplating the truth deeply, really getting to the meaning of what the words are being shared with us mean, and the implications of the word in terms of our own life, meditating on it, earnestly practicing it, and above all, trusting, having faith in the scriptures, trusting the great teachers who share this truth with us. Because that trust is what infuses power into the words that are being shared. A better way of putting that might be that it unlocks the liberating potential of the truths that are being shared with us. So it is a very important factor. Swamiji once said that intellectual spiritual knowledge has really no power. Well, to use his own words, he says, lacks a vital factor that will impel the knower actually to be and do what that knowledge is. And I really believe that vital factor is trust, is faith. It's what brings life to the teaching. And the beauty is that when we practice these truths, with that faith, when we deeply reflect on it, meditate, then it actually, and sooner or later, it's going to be experientially confirmed. So that combination of practice and faith and experience take the faith and the trust deeper and deeper, from the intellect to the core of our being, where we finally become established in direct experience. And as Swami Padmanabhanji said to me, trust is subsumed into that experience. But just to share with you, the truth that liberates, of course, what am I meaning here and what Swamiji means? And I will tell you a little experience I had. This is way back 45 years ago. In my first year, actually I was fortunate enough to meet Swami Brahmanandaji in the first month I was here. He was a hidden saint in our ashram. And I started sitting in on his classes for a few months. And then Swami Chidanandaji said, why don't you take the academy course as well? And so I took the academy course. Swami Brahmanandaji also taught in the academy. And at the end of the academy, there were exams. And 45 years ago, I was quite young. I had just graduated from university. I was a perennial student and very much still in student mode. And so naturally very concerned about the marks of the exam. And then Swami Brahmanandaji called me and this other student to his room sometime after the exams. And I was going there worried about my mark, I'm ashamed to say. And Swami Brahmanandaji, he didn't say one word about the marks or the exam, but he said something to this day I have never forgotten. He said, and you have to think of it in the context of all the information that we get in a course, spiritual course, for, in those days, 3 months. He says, all I want you to know is everything is Brahman here. Brahman alone, or God alone, is here. And I have never forgotten this. It just went directly into the heart. It became the basis of my sadhana, still is the basis of my spiritual practice. And I was reflecting on this, wondering why this went so much into my memory, because I don't remember, only a couple of other things I remember from that course 45 years ago. And it just occurred to me, because I trusted him implicitly. And the beauty of this great truth put into the words, God alone is, or if you use the words of Swami Chidanandaji, you are divine, everything is divine. God alone is, one reality alone is. That's all that's here. It is the essence of surrender, which is what the other speakers have mentioned so many times. I once asked Swami Brahmanandaji, what is surrender? And he said to me, the recognition that God alone is, Brahman alone is, and the ego is a zero. So it's inherent in those words. And Swami Chidanandaji, he said something quite similar. He actually very rarely used the word surrender. But one time he was asked very directly. And so he had no choice but to give an answer. So in his very typical way, Swamiji gave a very elaborate description of surrender is particularly the Puranas. And then he said, that is worldly surrender. And we were shocked. And then he said, with a very quiet voice, like the inner voice coming from inside. Spiritual surrender is when you disappear. And you can imagine, I'm sure all of us have been in this position at some time, many times maybe, in our spiritual life, also in our workaday life, where we find ourselves desperate. Something inwardly is going on or something outwardly is going on. We've tried everything. We've run out of all moves. And we're brought to the condition where we finally say, not my will, but thy will be done. The only real answer, but it takes a long time for many of us to get there. And that also is flattening the ego. So it's another way of coming to that zero. But as Swamiji said, oh, what the soul has to go through before it finally surrenders, which I think is all of our experience. And very interestingly, last summer in August, I was telling a friend, our Beeping, the theme of the retreat. And without thinking, she immediately said, well, how can you surrender without trust? And that is, of course, true. That, as we said before, without trust, surrender is practically impossible. Without surrender, trust is not going to be liberating. So they really work together. They're, as said before, they're two wings of the same bird. And what does that trust look like when it's a liberating trust? Well, for the devotee, one who's following the path of devotion, ideally, and probably we are all works in progress on this, but ideally, the devotee has absolute trust in the all goodness, the all love, the all wisdom, and all power of the divine. So the devotee says, whatever you do, inwardly or outwardly, I accept, inasmuch as you're doing it with love and wisdom. I don't question. And the Gyani has total faith, or is a work in progress, that Brahman alone is real, which we remember it is unchanging, it is unalterable. Nothing can touch it. Brahman alone is real, and the Gyani knows that the individual soul is non-different from that. They say Jivatma is non-different from Paramatma. And the world is unreal, meaning that it's constantly changing. So whatever the Gyani's inner experience is, or whatever its outer experience is, whatever is happening to the body or mind, or whatever is happening outside, the Gyani is the same, whether people change, conditions change, circumstances change, and so forth. But no matter what approach, and if we're lucky, we follow the yoga synthesis or integral yoga, so all these tools are available to us. So whatever path we follow, the end point is the same. There is a deep peace at the core of our being, which, as Swamiji says, is the foundation of happiness, which we're searching for, or that liberation we're searching for. But a couple of more points I just want to make in more of the introduction, and that is that somebody asked me what the theme was, and when I said that it was the trust that liberates, then that person said, oh, it's going to be about the path of devotion. And I said, no, not really. Faith or trust is required no matter what path we follow. It permeates it. And the one we least feel that would require faith or trust is the path of knowledge or inquiry. Because as we all know, in the path of inquiry, we are trained to use our intellect to analyze our own experience in order to discover who am I as the divine, I am divine, and what is the nature of this world. It is also divine, a manifestation of divine. So we are trained to use our intellect in a very special way. But we would not trust that training if we did not trust the scriptures who give us the pathways, or if we didn't trust our teachers who share, great teachers, who share these pathways with us. There would always be a lingering doubt that would prevent us from following, even though they're very simple, following these pathways wholeheartedly. And so they would fall short. And I remember there was a teacher who said, a great teacher who said, can you just trust enough to do what I'm saying? Then it will bear fruit. But trust enough to do that. And then sooner or later, when we do this sadhana of inquiry, it's sooner or later, so it can be very soon also, there will be experiential confirmation. But we have to trust our own experience. If it is confirmed by our own guru, if it is in harmony with the teachings of the scriptures, we have to trust it, not doubt it. And then finally, Swami Brahmanandaji, this book is going to be released on New Year's Eve. It's a reprint of a wonderful book he wrote, Wisdom Teachings. And I'm hoping you'll all get a copy. And in the last chapter of this book, he was saying that in order to realize the truth finally, all doubts have to be cleared. So we're using the intellect to remove all doubts. And then he says, finally, when all doubts are cleared, we are left with one thought, the Brahmakara Vritti. And then finally that dissolves, and faith takes over. And he says, because the whole being has to be totally relaxed or surrendered. So he says, faith takes over. So it's beginning, middle, and end for that last step as well, that faith or trust is absolutely required. And just one other small point, and that is all the great teachers of liberation, they never say, please do this or that, no matter the path, and then realize God in some future birth. Have we ever heard any of them say that? They say to us, Gurudev says, it is your birthright. Be up and doing in yogic sadhana. Realize God in this birth. You don't even have to come to an ashram. You can realize God in your home. But the question is, how many of us actually believe this? Do we think it's just hyperbole? Do we believe it really applies to us? Because to have trust in these words is very important so that we actually do the sadhana wholeheartedly. Otherwise, it will be one of the important things to us, but there will be other things that are really important to us as well. And sooner or later, even if we are doing many other things, because as Gurudev said, we could realize God in the world, so we don't have to, in the home, we don't have to come to an ashram, but we have to know how to convert everything into the spiritual, so that there is kind of a unified direction to one goal. And we're not really going to do that unless we really believe it is possible. And Swamiji has said, even if we don't reach it, if we have put our whole heart and soul into our sadhana, then we have been a success. Because what makes these great teachers so bold in saying it, it's your birthright, you can realize it in this birth, is because we're already that. It's the truth that we're already that is calling us. So as Swamiji says, the sadhana is actually getting rid of the wrong ideas that tell us we are not that tell us this world is separate from us, that it's something different than that. So it is actually very simple. What could be simpler than the few words God alone is, or you are divine, everything is divine? And yet we all know, just because it's simple, it is not so easy. So why is it that something that is simple seems to be difficult? So I thought I would share with you part of my daily swadhyaya, which is reading all of Swamiji's books. Swami, for those of you who don't know him, Swamiji, when I say that, is Swami Chidanandaji, who is that. He was the spiritual successor of Swami Shivananda. So I'm going to read something to you. And Swamiji used to give talks at the end of meditation. And he never came for the meditation. He always came when the meditation was complete. And whenever he came, those of you who remember who saw him, Pavarti for sure, would know that he came in a very, very meditative mood. He just radiated holiness. And after kind of acknowledging Gurudev, acknowledging Lord Narayana and the Vedas, he would sit down very slowly, chant, and then he would say, "Radiant, immortal Atman, worshipful homage to the divine reality that's infinite, beyond time and space, the source, the support, the substratum of millions and billions of universes that stream forth from it, remain for some time, and then are absorbed back into its imponderable infinity." And then later on, he might go on to say, when you sit here in the morning for meditation, the whole purpose is to connect yourself with that source and support of your being, the divinity within, through concentration and meditation. And yet, when you open your eyes and you walk out of this place, know absolutely, without doubt, that whatever you perceive with the senses is that same reality that you are connecting with inwardly during meditation. And he says, whatever you think about, see your God there, because it is the power of thought, the power of our mind. It is the power of the intellect, of the prowess of an intellect of Einstein, who came up with the theory of relativity. It is the power behind all our spiritual practices. It's the power that is imbued in the mantra when we're given that initiation. It is the power of our limbs and our digestion. There is nothing it isn't. It is the blueprint of all action, good and bad. So it's also the power of discrimination between those things that are helpful towards the goal and those things that may not be helpful. It's the choices we make, and it is also the consequences. So there's nothing that reality is not. So Swamiji, you can see how positive he was. And he was always, 99.9%, he was very positive. Very rarely would Swamiji be confronting. But what I want to read to you today is something that is a little bit more confronting, keeping in mind what I just said to you, keeping in mind what I said to you, because it kind of beautifully tells us why something that is so simple we seem to find difficult. So I'm going to read this. It's called When You Wake Up in the Morning, talk number 63. So he's just introduced, worshipful homage and this great truths. And he says, how many of you, and he's speaking, to people who are living in the ashram who are renunciates, are supposed to be renunciates. How many of you make this truth the basis of your life? How many of you remember this truth, ponder this truth, first thing every morning when you wake up? How many of you constantly affirm this truth, assert the truth, that you are inseparably linked up with the divine, inseparably related to the divine, inseparably a part of the divine? Why do you not do it? Why do you not wake up and immediately become filled with the awareness, I am part of the universal spirit, the supreme truth, the supreme principle? Why do you think immediately of something mundane, something prosaic, something outside of you, something gross, material, earthly, bound in time and space? Why? Have you ever wondered why? When I have the ability and the potential to inquire, seek, and find, and when I have been given the opportunity, when the doors have been thrown wide open for my ascent into a state of absolute divine consciousness, why is it that I am still groveling in this level in which I was born? If you do not ask yourself this question, who is going to do it for you? So it was a little bit confronting, but he actually gives us the answer, and then it's positive, because I don't think he would ever leave us with something just a bit confronting. So what he said was, it is because of the inscrutable, illusory power of the Para Brahman, which is Maya. Then he said, and this is the good news, the Lord himself, this is actually from the Gita, doesn't just leave us there. The Lord says, this divine Maya of mine is difficult to overcome. So that explains. But it is not that he only brought Maya into being and then did not show us the way out. It is not so. He said, it's Sanskrit, then this is the translation, those who take refuge in me alone, they cross over this Maya. So surrender and trust. They are the ones. So we could really understand this whole journey as a journey of surrender and trust. But before we get on to that point, I just thought to review a little bit about what Maya is and how it works in our life, even though we went into a lot of detail last year in our retreat when we were talking about the implications of the prayer, lead us from the unreal to the real. But what is Maya? Maya tells us where there is no distance between us and that reality, where there is no separation between us and the world, where there is no otherness, to use the words of Swami Muktanandaji yesterday, Maya creates the illusion of distance between us and the reality. It creates the illusion of separation among ourselves. It creates the illusion of otherness. So we are in this position where we feel, except when grace is visiting us, from the highest point of view, we feel ourselves separate from the source of our being. We feel ourselves separate from our fellow beings, or we see otherness. So how have we ended up in this boat? Well, one way of understanding it, and it's what I've absorbed from here, but I think is really a helpful way to look at it, is, and I'm putting it in my own words also, is that reality beyond time and space, when it, and infinite, when it manifested as millions and billions of worlds, but we are actually concerned about this one, this universe, when it manifested as this universe of ours with infinite names and forms, as Swamiji says, it manifested as you, the pure sense of I am that indwells all of us. The knowledge I am, and it's immediately recognizable because we all know that we are. Nobody has to tell us. It's the primal knowledge. And that pure sense of I am, it is the storehouse of the freedom that we are searching for. It's not the final, but it's the storehouse. It shines forth as the freedom, the peace, the joy that we are searching for. It is clear seeing, and it shines forth as wisdom. So there's no problem there. It is the common consciousness that unifies us as one whole. But something compels that pure sense of I am, or a portion of it perhaps, to identify with the body and mind. And so he goes from a profoundly unlimited condition to a profoundly limited condition. That's what ego is. Or some could say the individual soul, but either way. And when that happens, now that wouldn't apply to us now because we're all on the path, so there's been, awakening happening. But when it originally happens, it almost 100% eclipses the memory of our true nature. But not 100%. There is a trace memory left. As Swami Amritarupananda said several times yesterday, the freedom that we're searching for is already inherent in us. The peace, the joy is inherent in us. So it's still in us. I mean, that consciousness that's identified, it's there in us. And so we want it. It's a trace memory. We want it because it's better than anything we could experience in the world. But Maya, unfortunately, tells us, it doesn't come and tell us that what you're searching for is in your true nature. Go back home. It tells us what you're searching for is an objective experience. Whether it's inner experience, even having a brilliant intellect, but whatever it is, inner experience, beautiful feelings, or whether it's in outer experiences of the senses. And this is something as seekers we know very well. We know very well that it's not, but that the belief in that and Maya's hold on us in that dies very hard. I think we all know that very well. And so that is why Lord Krishna says, it is those who take refuge in me alone that can cross over this Maya. So, how is it? Oh, and then one other thing I wanted to share. Not only does Maya tell us in outer experience and inner experience, it even tells us that God's an object. And that also dies very hard because right till the very end, there's kind of a very subtle searching for it in something very subtle, even though we know it's not the case. But it dies very hard. And there's an example of a great teacher of Vedanta He became of non-dualism. But when he was a child, and up until early adulthood, he was having many, many visions of Lord Krishna. And Lord Krishna is that which attracts. So you could imagine how beautiful those experiences were. And he thought that's all there was. And at one point, when he was grown up, he went to the south. He was from North India. He went to the south, and he was advised to go see Ramana Maharshi. So he went to see Ramana Maharshi, and he asked Ramana, I think he was testing him, can you show me God? And Ramana said, I cannot show you God. God is not an object that can be seen. God is the seer. God is not an object that can be known. God is the knower. Knower cannot be known. Seer cannot be seen. God is not an object. God is the subject, the inner subject. So this threw him for a bit of a loop, I think. But this is to keep in mind, and another reason it is difficult, because it is a movement from the known to the unknown, which perhaps is a reason that Swami Brahmananda spoke about that necessity of faith in that very last step into the unknown, complete unknown. So how does, this is our boat, this is what we're in, how does, if we're taking refuge in God alone, I'm going to use the word grace, because we can forget about Maya now, and we can just look at how grace works. And really, grace, because God alone is, and nothing happens outside the sovereign will of the divine. And so whatever is happening is a movement of grace in us. That is the most positive way we can look at our whole life in totality. So grace comes in the form of really beautiful experiences. Sometimes they're very subtle for some people. Sometimes they're very grand, depending on the temperament. Spiritual experiences that attract us to God, because otherwise what would encourage us to leave the world behind? But even grace will show us the goodness that is possible. Even they'll show us that it brings humility to us in a person who's not even interested in the spiritual life. They just have a preponderance of goodness or sattva in them. So that it just shows what's possible for us, that kind of goodness, even without, but it's still grace. Whether the person knows it, they have no interest in the spiritual, but it's still a manifestation of grace where they become great inspiration to us. Maybe a mentor or something. So grace comes in the form of these beautiful experiences, goodness, but grace also comes in the form of difficulties and obstacles. And as Swamiji says, even agonizing experiences. And he says he says, don't see difficulties as difficulties, obstacles as obstacles, painful experiences as painful experiences. See them as Brahman manifested. See them as God manifesting in your life. I like to say grace manifesting in our life. And if we do, it will start to transform. But it takes time. It takes a huge amount of faith. But it, as we said right at the beginning, if we contemplate the truth that's shared with us that God alone is, we keep on contemplating it and practicing it, then, and there's experiential confirmation, all of this works together to take this deeper and deeper. It's really this is the journey that we're on, you could say. Okay, so we don't worry about the beautiful experiences. So we're not asking grace, why are you giving us beautiful experiences? The only thing important is that we don't grab onto them for ourselves, that we see them as a gift of grace, because we know when we come down from that experience, we are not worthy. But, such as the ego, it grabs onto it and thinks it's, superior. This is something that happens to all of us, and just to be aware of it. But it's the painful things that we wonder about. Why do we have to go through the painful things? We could just as well do without those. So, actually, tomorrow I would like to get into more depth on this, but just to share a few points, just briefly, of why maybe grace seems to find it necessary to visit us with challenges. Well, at the more benign level, we could say the difficulties and challenges that we face are necessary to build inner spiritual strength. In fact, I've often said, if I pray for anybody, it's for inner spiritual strength, to bear whatever they need to bear, including myself, to bear whatever we need to bear, to do whatever we need to do, and to feel the divine, if we're so lucky enough to feel the divine also, in that difficulty or problem. But the inner spiritual strength, especially, we know when we taste a little bit of the resistance that can happen. So that is one point. Inner spiritual strength. But also, as mentioned before, as Swamiji said, intellectual knowledge simply does not have the power to transform us. It has to sink deeper and deeper. And when we're faced with challenges and difficult experiences, obstacles, then we get an idea of how well we're doing in our surrender and trust. And it will show us the area, because there may be areas where it is relatively easy for us to surrender and trust. Maybe it's even been a gift to us. But then we'll discover areas where it's not so easy. And that is perhaps one of the reasons grace finds it necessary to challenge us. And it's also, I think, really important for us to realize that these difficulties and challenges and sometimes agonizing experiences can come at the beginning, can and do come at the beginning, middle, and end of our spiritual life. We can go through long periods of, we could say almost relative grace, or certainly of calm, or, we feel things we would just like to remain where we are. Just keep me here, Lord. And so we can find ourselves. And then all of a sudden a storm comes. And I'm like, well, God, what has happened here? And Swamiji even gives the example of what happened to Lord Buddha on the dawn of liberation, or what happened to Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And I'll get into a little bit of that tomorrow. But even, everything is going fine, we feel this subtle peace, or just, again, I just like to remain here. And then all of a sudden, it all disappears. And we find ourselves in a complete desert, complete dryness. And we wonder, oh my God, what has happened? What have I done wrong? This sadhana is no longer working for me. I'm going to go somewhere else to look. And this is where it's really important to have faith. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. We should not go looking somewhere else. We should actually carry on with our sadhana, the sadhana that has been given to us by our guru and our great teachers. Carry on with it. It's where they say perseverance and commitment is really, really important. And faith infuses without faith, that commitment and perseverance is not important, but it's not possible. But one of the things that, we have to realize is that beautiful experiences are not the final. As Swami Brahmanandaji said, or just think, Chidananda says, you are divine, everything is divine. Everything means everything. And Swami Brahmanandaji said people would come to him and say, I want to experience God. And he would say, you're experiencing nothing but God. All experience is God experience. And a lot of these things, you've heard me say before, but I think they're always relevant. We forget easily. And anyways, he would get frustrated sometimes, and he says, you people, you can't believe this world as it is God. And so, and in the Gita, when it says in chapter 14 towards the end, when Arjuna is asking Lord Krishna, what is the marks of a sage? And Lord Krishna says, a sage is the same no matter what guna is present, whether it's sattva, which we want, rajas or tamas, they're the same. So that's where we want to get, to the point where something in us is the same no matter what our experience is. Now, it can feel like something we don't like, but there's tremendous freedom in that, because we lose our freedom when we want something, including the beautiful experiences. That's why we have to offer them back to God, thank God for them, and really reflect on them, take the juice out of them. What is the implication of this experience? So that is perhaps another reason grace has to challenge us, and maybe even withdraw even the relative calm that we're feeling, the relative peace that we're feeling, very subtle. And then there are some agonizing experiences that I think all of us face. It comes in different forms. I think we all know that there may be hidden desires deep in our psyche that we may consciously think we've overcome, but they're lurking there. Or painful experiences that we may have buried, or even traumas. And grace has to bring them to the surface. As Swamiji says, we have to face them, deal with them, and then ultimately transcend. Because they are going to be influencing us whether we know it or not. They'll be impeding our progress. So not to resist them, not to worry about them. And tomorrow I will get into this in a little bit more detail, because there's just wonderful ways to overcome. As Lord Krishna said, whatever we face, whatever difficulties there are, can be overcome through practice and through dispassion. And these things, the hidden desires or desires or whatever it is, we don't have to get rid of them. The main thing is we have dispassion for them, so they don't touch us. So right now when they come up, they grab hold of our attention. So Swamiji says, why is it? Even, ordinary pleasures. But why is it that we don't immediately wake up in the morning and think about God? Why is it we're so easily drawn out from our center? So these things draw us up. But what is necessary is dispassion, letting go of our attachment. And it can be done because the solution to all these difficulties that we face is inherent in the truth. That is the beauty. It all works together. It's all one whole. So we never have to worry about even something that is agonizing. It is grace coming in that form for us. And the more we can practice that with faith, in faith and trust, infusing power into it, life into it, then the more we'll realize we don't have to know why these things come. This doesn't mean that in some cases, for some people, therapy is not necessary. Even grace will bring therapy if necessary. So that nothing is outside of this. So it doesn't mean that may not play a role. But we don't have to know, why am I suffering? What has gone wrong? We just have to have the faith that grace is bringing this to our attention for some reason. And I just wanted to share with you, just for the end part, a couple of things that I think I came across. I was listening to a video by a Christian, a non-dual Christian belonging to the Franciscan order. And his name's Richard Rohr. He's still alive. Quite old now, and no longer teaching. But I was listening to a video of his, and he defined faith, which the definition I absolutely loved. I loved it so much that I backtrack on the YouTube and wrote it down. Just one sentence. And he said, faith is believing in the darkness which was once seen in the light. So darkness is no problem, but believing in the darkness which was once seen in the light. And Swami Chidanandaji has also shared something very similar to this. And many of you will know this story. It has actually been, not the whole story, but what he said has been published. It's from a letter that he wrote to my Swami Amritarupananda, who was my father then. Well, still, but became a Swami and now is gone. But actively then. And anyways, he met Swamiji in 1960. And Swamiji at that time, although was highly advanced, as I said in the orientation meeting, he turned his life completely upside down. But Swamiji said, I'm not like Gurudev yet. So he obviously fully intended. And then, when he got back from his first world tour, which was about 1.5 to 2 years, and he came back to the ashram, he just felt, I have to leave. I have to go on pilgrimage around India, totally trusting in God, incognito. And actually Gurudev begged him not to go. But Swamiji insisted, so Gurudev gave his blessings. So during that period, say this was in 1961 when he returned, sometime in 1962, probably late 1962, Swamiji wrote this letter to my father. And it was a beautiful letter, full of love, full of wisdom, full of teachings. But there was one paragraph that really revealed what is so helpful for us to know, because most people only knew Swamiji as a great saint and could never imagine him ever going through any difficulty that we face. But in this little paragraph he says, I'm having great difficulty knowing what the will of God is for me. And he says, this is something we all have to face in the realm of the spirit. Because he only gives light in ration units for the next step ahead. But human impatience wants light for the whole path, right till the end. And then Swamiji says, does he care? He does his thing in his own way. Then Swamiji ends and says, but for heaven's mercy, I know he is in the darkness. And then he says, he is the darkness. But for this knowledge, it would not be possible to bear this night. So that gives great comfort to us, to have trust. Not only is he in the darkness, but he is the darkness. That's the most profound implication of knowing that God alone is, and practicing it and reflecting it. And that just brings us full circle to what Swami Brahmanandaji said to me. All I want you to know is God alone is here. Brahman alone is here. And he says, look, pay attention to this. It's the saving knowledge. It's the knowledge that will set you free. He says, have faith in the scriptures. Have faith in the teachers. And I would add on, have faith in our own experience. So we end that for today. Hari Om Tat Sat.
you.